At this time, I want to call the regular board meeting for March the 18th to order. This is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public comment during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. Would everybody rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Mr. Chambers, would you please call roll?
Mr. Nichols.
Here.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Here.
Ms. Pritchard.
Here.
Ms. Moyer.
Here.
Mr. West.
Here.
Thank you.
At this time, we're going to have a moment of silence for Tess Ewert after I read something. Tess Ewert started with Medina City Schools in 1993. Tess was hired by Principal Tom McKenna at Medina Junior High in anticipation of the opening of Root Middle School. Tess spent the majority of her career teaching 8th grade science and technology at Root. More recently, she split time between Claggett Middle School teaching 8th grade science and Medina High School teaching Project Lead the Way. This current school year, she was assigned solely to Medina High School teaching 9th grade physical science. Tess was an accomplished educator who earned her national board certification and master teaching designation. She also received Medina City Schools' highest honor, the Distinguished Service Award. She always put her students first and worked endlessly on their behalf. She also would willingly share her technological knowledge with her coworkers. Our condolences to Tess' husband, John, and her 2 sons, Nicholas and Jacob. Could we please have a moment of silence? Thank you very much. First item up is approval of the minutes from the regular board meeting on February the 18th, 2025.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the February meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Pritchard.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Any questions, comments on those minutes? Anyone? Hearing none. Mr. Chambers, when you're ready.
Ms. Pritchard.
Aye.
Mr. Nichols.
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Aye.
Ms. Moyer.
Aye.
Mr. West.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next, I would, any additions, removals, or modifications to the agenda? Anyone?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Parkhurst.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Any questions or comments? Mr. Chambers?
Ms. Parkhurst.
Aye.
Mr. Nichols.
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard.
Aye.
Ms. Moyer.
Aye.
Mr. West.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next up are informational and discussion items. Superintendent's communications. Mr. Sable.
Great, thank you and good evening. And I always love seeing our staff and students out in the audience. I think the highlight of our board meeting every month is when we get to hear our building report. And I'd like to welcome Principal Newton here this evening with Principal McGinty for Canavan's presentation.
I always travel with an entourage, so tonight we've got a really good lineup. We have our 4th grade students, and their fabulous teachers are here tonight. Miss Daling, our art teacher, and Miss Lococo, who is a 4th grade regular education teacher who really specializes in those content areas of science and social studies. And it's sort of a unique position where she is then, her goal with science and social studies is to really embed ed, cross-curricular, a lot of the literacy initiative too that's happening within the building, and working closely with her grade level colleague, Mrs. Beth Nickley, who's here tonight also, and Mr. Mike Pafumi, our math teacher, as well as our art teacher, Miss Daling. So I am going to have Miss Lococo and Miss Daling lead us off and talk to you about the wonderful, wonderful learning that their students have been doing.
Hi, nice to see you all. So the project that we'd like to talk to you about is focused on transportation and inventors. It encompasses science, social studies, ELA, and art standards. And wait. And it also focuses on our district's initiative for the deeper learning. Specifically, in this project, we focused on students being communicators, innovative problem solvers, and resilient lifelong learners. Before the beginning of our project, we focused on research with Ohio inventors. Students got to research lots of different inventors, and then they chose an inventor that they thought was the most impactful, and then did a project
We are the Wright brothers, and first airplane with this.
in Chatterpix, where it's really a fun application where they can choose any kind of an image that they'd like, and then as you can see, they can animate it to then explain the research that they did, focusing on evidence to back up their opinion. So we'll just play one so you get an idea of how they did that.
Hi, my name is Carl Benz. I made the electric car start. Over 3.3 million people use it because it made it faster to get around. It was impactful because it made travel fast. According to the Inventor's Times, Carl Benz's wife traveled 65 miles, and people were surprised by her arrival.
So it was really a lot of fun to watch them choose inventors and inventions of their choice, and then we could build that into our journey through history, starting with paleo people, archaic people, Native Americans, and then as we keep going throughout history. Which then brings us to how we then collaborated to build that into the art curriculum.
Hi, everyone. So once I talked to Jen about what they were doing in their classroom, I thought it was amazing to do a transportation design project. And the students would bring in their Chromebooks, and from there we researched, they sketched their past transportation ideas of the ones that they were interested in. And it was so cool because some kids wanted to do airplanes, and you'll see that. Some wanted to do shoes. Some people wanted to do tires, and like we had hot air balloons, like everything you could think of across the board. It was so cool. And then we built a digital timeline, which that was something that just kind of grew because they would come over with their Chromebook and be like, Miss Daling, look at this, look what I found. And we just kept building it, and it's like 60 pages long or so, right? It's huge. And then we would compare and contrast like ideas with the past, the present, different materials that they used back then compared to now. And also like what type of designs today would improve like living, safety, and the environment. The next slide just shows, for example, one of the things that we found was this car that it's a prototype right now that could go into the water, like off of traffic and kind of like during like hurricanes, safely and drive, kind of like a submarine on wheels in a way. So that was really cool. Students had to include the year, the make and model, who it was for, if it was for like kids, adults, if it was for everyone, what materials, if it was recycled, and like how fast, what it cost, right? And why it was unique. That was the fun part when they had to create their future one. They had to look at the past, the present, and then they had to go in and dive into like what a futuristic model would be of their own. And then these guys can, we can start with, so Declan, you're number one. He's the one.
Where should I go?
You could step up here, buddy.
So, I did
I did,
Hold that for you, buddy.
I did planes because I wanted to see what the Wright brothers were like. So I wanted to look up the plane that they made. So I wanted to get information from that, and I said, like, okay, I want to draw this. I'll try to. And if I mess up, it's okay because it's my first one, so I can just do it again. And I just did it, and it turned out good. So then I kept going with planes, and then I did the present one, which goes 860 miles per hour. And I did the futuristic airplane. It goes 1,300 miles per hour. And the circle part of it, it's like, it makes the plane fly. And then it's like, it makes it fly because there's like a propeller in it. So like, there's no, like, I forget what they're called. What?
Hovering type thing?
Yeah. Like a hovering thing and wings, yeah. And then and you can, like, inside of it, there's like a button that you can make it automatically fly. So like if it's at nighttime, you can just fly it by itself and it'll go, and you just have to put in where you're going and it'll go there right away. And then, so I wanted to do airplanes because I like airplanes. They're really fun to go on. And that's why I did airplanes.
Carson, you want me to hold it for you? Awesome. Can you say why you did this one?
So I did airplanes, and I mostly chose the World War II fighter plane because of my family. They're veterans. My papa was engineer for the B-24 Liberator for World War II, and that's why I chose planes. So the first one could go about 440 miles per hour. It costed around $50,000 to build, and it could carry up to 2 passengers, the back gunner and the pilot. And the present plane was it could go to 500 to 600 miles per hour, and it costed over $80 million to build. And it can carry 150 to 600 passengers. And my futuristic plane, it could go 1,000 miles per hour. It's a stealth bomber. It can carry about 500 passengers, and it's $100 million to build. And I chose that because I really like fighter planes.
I did a plane because, like, I love riding on airplanes, and I just thought it would be fun. So the first one goes about 100 miles per hour, and it couldn't carry very many passengers, and it made like a really loud noise when you started it. The second one went 500 to 600 miles per hour. It wasn't very loud, and 150 to 600 passengers could ride it. And then the last one, it goes 200 miles per hour, 1,000 through 1,500 passengers. It's really quiet, and yeah. I don't even know what this is.
Great. That's wonderful. Thank you. All right. So those are all our planes, and then we have two different people that said shoes. These are really cool.
So I did shoes because, first of all, I never rode a plane before, and and I also thought like it would be very interesting to see how something as simple as shoes could evolve. So my first shoes are like really thin, and they were made of string, like the little strap, and then also they weren't very warm. And my present day shoes are like thicker, they're easier to put on, and they're just better. And then my futuristic shoes, they're made of ocean plastics, so it like helps save the environment, and it's just like really interesting.
Good job. Thank you. Mrs. Osnott.
I chose Uggs because it was like still cold at the time and we were doing this. And the first Uggs were made in the 1920s and they were made out of sheepskin. And the present Uggs are still made out of sheepskin. I don't know why, but my future Uggs are like, it has some like heaters at the bottom, so you just press a button and it'll like keep your feet warm. And there's fur inside. It's waterproof. It has lots of pink. I chose pink because it's my favorite color. And it's still made out of sheepskin, and it costs $250.
Okay, now we have Brandon Williams. Just go like this. Can you get up there?
Okay. So I did something like I don't think people acknowledge much. So I did 1900 BC, the horseback riding when they used horses to get around because they didn't have any other type of transportation. And then I did the present camper van, and then it's special because it helps you store camping supplies, and it's sold from either $10,000 to $20,000, and it goes. Wait, can I? 50 right here.
Yeah.
55 to 65 miles per hour. And then I did 2065, the future camper van. And I would name it the Axle because it has a tail which helps you swim underwater. And then it sold for $1 million. And then it goes 2,000 miles per hour. And it also can fly. It's kind of
awesome. Here, you can help. All right. Mrs. Uriah.
I did buses because that's how I get to school every day. And the 1906 bus was designed by Henry Ford. It can only go 24 miles per hour. And it was a double-decker bus. It was pretty cool. And then the present bus average goes 50 miles per hour. And the two stripes are just iconic. 3,000. I designed it. And it's like a flying plane. You can press a button inside to make it fly with the fire on the bottom. And then it goes 80 miles per hour. It's really colorful, and it's flying, and it has LED lights inside.
Awesome. And then, yeah, that was everyone. The second thing we had a designer come in that worked at Two Step and speak to the fourth graders. And before he came in, we generated questions in class. We wrote down some of them and we sent them to him. And I really thought they were so thoughtful. One of them said, there was one, what are some of the products and features that include everyone? Like example, children in wheelchairs. And I love that the students were already thinking about how others can play with toys and not just isolate it just one person, everyone. Also, they were really curious, what was the inspiration, how they came up with the ideas. And also, so he was a toy designer. He went to Cleveland State Institute of Art. Amazing. It was just incredible. His sons are video game designers. So the kids were they were in it, Everybody was asking questions.
Yeah.
They learned about future careers, of what they could do and someday. And I don't know, is there anything else you want to?
Yeah, I think it's just been really nice to see the connections that they're making. And for me, as a classroom teacher at this point in the school year, it's been really great to watch how they're starting to make connections from things they learned from the beginning of the year and carry it over to now, to be able to ask a question and then research and find the answers more and more independently, and just be able to take hold of their own learning. So and enjoy it.
It was so fun
Yeah.
to do this. And we had the kids, they sent him cards, and it was just so fun to read what they wrote, how, he inspired them. They learned so much, and it was just amazing. We had conversations after it, and yeah, we loved it. And then we also found out just recently that the Historical Society is having the historical toys on display that hopefully we can get down there to show the kiddos. I think that'd be really cool to see. So, yeah. All right, so that's it. So thank you.
Thanks
so much. Thank you.
I'd like to say I always like seeing what each of the schools come in and do. It's always nice to see that deeper learning and all of that that's going on. I can't speak to shoes, or really vehicles or buses, but I'm sure that there's museums with all of these somewhere with historical. But for those that did the planes here in Ohio, the Museum of the United States Air Force, which is down in Dayton, has an enormous collection of planes, all the way from the original a reproduction of the Wright Flyer and the first planes, all the way up to that stealth bomber that young man put up there. But I can tell you that stealth bomber was more than $100 million, about 10 times that. So, but it's nice to see. So, and I like planes too. So. Sorry. Thank you very much.
I want to mention something real quick. So for all the kids out there, you've designed your futuristic version of whatever, a shoe, transportation, bus, airplane. Try and remember that and look back on it in 10, 15, 20 years and see how far technology has come to getting close to what you imagined. Even if you imagined it was 1,000 years in the future, just take a look and see like how far we've come. And I say this short story real quick. So when I was in 4th grade, I don't even know the year, but a while ago, not as long as some other people but I had a writing prompt. We had journals and we'd write every single day. We had a writing prompt of something that you could do. And I don't know if I went rogue with the writing prompt or if it was something about design a thing of the future. And I ended up sitting down and writing out, there's this fighter plane and it takes off like a helicopter and it has all these cool features on it. And I don't know, 10 years ago or so, I ended up finding the book, reading through it, and being like, oh my gosh, I basically designed like the F-35, my fighter pilot enthusiast airplane guy, yeah. I basically had designed like what the F-35 would end up being like as a 4th grader that knew nothing about airplanes, nothing about anything like that. So it's just really cool to see like your imagination when you're at your age and how close it actually comes to reality when technology catches up. So just hold on to that one.
I just wanted to thank you all for coming in, especially it is a really nice day, and to spend your time inside with us was a treat for us, and for you to share all of your talents with us and what you've learned. I do want to make a comment. The young man who was the first one to speak about the airplane and said if he messed up, well, it was okay, he could try again. That's an awesome way to look at things, and I think we all should incorporate that into our lives. So good for you. Nice job.
Just one last comment. I didn't know Uggs were made in 1922. I thought it was a recent thing, but I guess not.
I'm excited about the flying bus. Maybe we'll get more bus drivers. Well,
Get on that, Ryan.
Thank you, Canavan, for coming and joining us today. Normally I send you right away because you're usually anxious to get out of here, but I do want to let you know that we do have an important state budget presentation that we're doing, which you're welcome to stay for. If not, we're going to make sure to get this out to all of your staff and your parents, so go enjoy the weather. I'll be 7 feet tall. Well, as all of our board members are aware, and I'm guessing most of our community is aware, is Governor DeWine introduced his proposal for the new state budget for the next 2 years. That state budget could have and will likely have a major impact on the funding of public schools in Ohio. So this evening I wanted to spend a few minutes sharing with you information regarding the proposed state budget and the potential impacts on our school district. I think in order to have a full understanding of the impact of the budget on Medina City schools, it's important to really look back at our recent history. One thing I'm going to talk about in the presentation are ways that parents, community members, students, staff can reach out to legislators to advocate for our school district. And in the time that I've spent in Columbus working with organizations and working with legislators, one of the things they emphasize over and over again is the importance of districts sharing their stories and really putting a personal note to it in regards to how funding impacts students and kids overall in our community. So our recent history, as we're aware, has been littered with financial challenges. We were placed in fiscal caution by the Ohio Department of Education, and this was due to our 5-year forecast. We had been deficit spending in order to spend down funds within our budget, and we got to a position in year 3 where we were looking at going into the red or negative. This is a sign where the state intervenes and ensures that strategies are put into place for school districts in order to make sure that they are fiscally sound. One of the strategies that was implemented was a $2 million in reductions. The second strategy that was implemented was to put a levy on the ballot. And we had a lot of conversation in regards to what kind of levy was needed and presented that information to our community. The levy did not pass on its first 2 attempts, and that had consequences for our district. In addition to the original $2 million in reductions, an additional $2 million in reductions going into the following school year after the 2 levy failures resulted in 48 staff members being reduced within the school district as well as other programming. We were very fortunate to see our community come to our support, actually just this past November. That support resulted in a fixed 10-year, $7.5 million levy passing. The passage of that levy allowed us to avert an additional $8 million in reductions, which would have completely changed the landscape of our school district and how students were receiving their education within our communities. We are in a position right now after the passage of the levy where we are fiscally sound with tight belts. So the look at continued reductions because of deficit spending is something that we are continuing to do, and the goal has been to do that through attrition. Unfortunately, with the governor's proposed budget, it throws a wrench after just passing our levy and gaining that community support. And the reason why is because his proposed budget as it stands would result in another $1.5 million in reductions for our school district, $1.5 million in less state funding for our school district. And if you look at what the result of $4 million in reductions with 48 staff positions and other programming being reduced, us already being in a position where we're looking at making an additional $2 million cuts over time through attrition because of continued deficit spending, the $1.5 million that we could be facing is a real challenge for us in continuing to offer programming like we currently do. So a little information about the proposed state budget. The proposed state budget that the governor has presented has $103.4 million in reductions statewide. So he's looking at reducing the amount of money going to districts across the state. The theory behind this is that the state overall has seen a reduction in enrollment. This isn't due to students going to private schools. It's not due to the voucher system. It's just due to a decline in the population of young people across the state. This reduction isn't hitting districts all the same way. So the formula within the proposed budget is faulty. We are a district that is facing $1.5 million in reductions over the next 2 years with this proposal. There are districts in the state that would be gaining funds. There's some districts that would be remaining flat. So we as a district are in an unfortunate situation. We have a stabilized student enrollment. The state has done enrollment studies for us, 2 of them recently over the last 3 to 5 years. Both of those studies conducted by the state are predicting that our enrollment stays where it is now over the next 10 years. Despite that, we're facing a potential reduction. I'm aware of districts that I've worked with in Columbus, in the Columbus area, that are actually seeing pretty drastic increases in their enrollment in their districts. We're all aware of how Columbus has just been booming over the last 10 years, and those districts are facing reductions. So finding the rhyme or reason within the formula, when you talk about overall reductions due to decreased students in schools, it doesn't make a lot of sense with the specific schools and communities that are impacted by these actual reductions. Another key issue with the proposal is it doesn't take into account the drastically increasing property values within communities, which impacts the formula of how school districts are funded. And it also doesn't take inflation into account. So the proposed funding of public schools in Ohio is based off of 22 figures, not 24 figures. And in addition to that, with the rising property values within communities, it affects what levels of fundings districts will receive, because wealthier districts receive less money, and if property values are going up, which is how they determine the wealth of a school district, it's going to again decrease the amount of funding that a school district receives. And I think this is the major thing that many of these public schools in Columbus are facing. So the impact on Medina City schools, as I mentioned, a $1.5 million projected loss as things stand over a 2-year period. And the impact of this, and it's difficult to stand up here and talk about this again because it wasn't that long ago. It was just the beginning of this school year, maybe in September, where I talked about reductions. We would have no choice but to implement further reductions, which we were not planning on doing with the passage of the levy other than the ones through attrition. We would have no choice but to look deeper into various ways that we would need to make reductions so we don't go into a position of fiscal watch again. So the overall impacts to Medina City schools. I think one important piece to look at is the little amount of funding we already receive from the state. So with a $1.5 million reduction, we will be receiving extremely low amounts of support from the state. In Medina City schools, the average per pupil expenditure is about $13,000 per year. Currently, approximately $850 of that comes from the state. So that $850 per student would be reduced. And as I already mentioned, the inputs for the formula are outdated. They're 22 figures. Putting 24 figures into the formula, considering the property value increases and also inflation, could have a major impact on that, how that formula would impact schools. So negative consequences, which means even with the new levy, we would be facing a shortfall in funding. The other challenge that we face with the proposed budget is the burden that it puts on our community. Our community in November, our strategy was not to try and sway community members which way to vote, but to present options of what they want from our schools, and then communicate what the costs would be in order to maintain the kind of programming or class sizes within our district. In order to maintain what we currently have, the burden is again shifted to our local property tax payers and our local community members in order to provide more funding for our schools. Now, why is that happening? Because the state looks at schools across the state. If you're considered a wealthy district based off your property values, as we all know, our values just drastically went up here in the community. The state says, well, you're even wealthier now, you should be able to pay more for your local schools. What's really frustrating with this mindset is that, and we've talked about this before, our funding system in Ohio by Ohio Supreme Court over 2 decades ago was determined as unconstitutional. And one of the primary reasons why it was considered unconstitutional is because of the heavy reliance in the state on property taxes to fund the public schools. And I actually just heard this figure last week, and I just about fell out of my chair. You know, we've got a lot of pride in Ohio, not just here in Medina, but in Ohio as well. And we expect our students to perform at top levels when compared to other states. But we don't want to fund our schools to help our students perform at those top levels. Ohio currently is ranked 35th in the country in terms of the amount of funding that's provided at the state level to fund public schools. And obviously, if this proposed plan goes into place, we're going to drop even further, even lower. Property tax limits, and this is a real challenge, and it's something we faced with the last levy as a misunderstanding, is people assume because their property values are going up, schools are getting additional funds. For us, that's not the case. Because we are not at the funding floor and we're on the guarantee, I'm not going to get into the details of those tonight, but I would encourage, if you want information, to reach out to Mr. Chambers and myself, because we're willing to have those conversations. But it puts us in a situation where the increased property values are not having any kind of major impact on the funding that we're receiving. So when a levy is passed, such as our last levy for $14.4 million, all we'll ever receive for that levy is 14.4. It won't be increased with the increase of property values. So what are the impacts on our students? This is the message that I think is important to talk about. And again, it goes back to what are our expectations as a community for our schools and our students. But this is literally pulled from the list that we had presented to the board back in September, because we would have to look at the same kind of reductions. The elimination of programming, the reduction in staffing. I estimate in order to meet the reduction level we would need, we would be facing approximately around 15 staff that would need to be reduced. In order to reduce those staff, it means reducing programs like what you see up here, as well as increasing class sizes. No matter what we do, I think it's important to emphasize that we are committed to our students and our community. And whatever level of funding we have, we are going to do everything we can to provide the best education for our students possible. The next piece that I wanted to share some information about is the voucher program. And the voucher program does have a direct impact on public schools in Ohio. And our board elected several years ago to be advocates against the voucher program because of the money that it disallows from going to public schools. The original intent of the voucher program, which has actually been around for quite a while, I want to say approximately 15 plus years. The original intent of the voucher program was to help families and kids living in low social economic areas that didn't have the same kind of access to high quality education that other students in Ohio had. And the voucher program served that purpose for a number of years. I can tell you that if you talk to the voucher program originally impacted the big city schools more than anybody, and if you talk to school leaders in those districts, they'll tell you that it hurt them back then because it was diverting funding away from their schools to make them better, sending kids to voucher schools, which generally do not perform at the same levels. The current reality, and this has literally occurred over the last 2 years, is that the voucher program is no longer serving low economic families the way that it used to. It's actually a program where it's now serving the wealthy. It's serving households that have 6- and 7-figure salaries whose students never even attended a public school or Medina City schools to begin with. And I'm going to show you some specific data for Medina City schools and how that has impacted us. Last year, the state spent just about $1.2 billion in voucher programming. This is a drastic increase from previous years. And those funds, if they were rediverted back to the public schools, could completely solve the funding issue across Ohio. So this is our district. You can see back in 21-22 and 22-23, this is the amount of students participating in the voucher program. The vast majority of those students were local economic families taking advantage of the voucher program. If we jump from the 22-23 to the 23-24 school year, the whole chart just drastically shifts. The amount of students that are taking advantage, or families taking advantage of the voucher program, are wealthier, and high-income families. So looking at the percentage increase blows my mind. This didn't happen over the course of a short period of time. This happened in a year. An 1,800% increase, a 1,700% increase in terms of students receiving vouchers, wealthy families utilizing vouchers, those funds not being available to help Medina City schools. And we are not seeing a decrease in enrollment because of this voucher usage. Again, these are kids, these are families that never attended Medina City schools to begin with. Parents made a choice for alternative education options for their own reasons for students, and now are benefiting from public funds to help them fund those individual options. I think what really is lost in this conversation is when we look at Ohio as a whole. I've heard comments made about voucher programs is good for Ohio, it's good for kids, but the reality is 89% of students across Ohio attend a public school. So the vast majority of students and kids in Ohio are going to a public school, yet we're shifting funding for the 10% to support schools that are non-public schools when it's in our Constitution that there must be a common education, public education system funded and supported through Ohio. So if you look at the chart here, traditional districts, which are public schools, have seen a almost $32 million reduction in funding and are facing an additional $40 million in reductions over the next 2 years. Meanwhile, other schools, non-public schools, are seeing pretty drastic increases, especially when you consider that this is 11% of kids across Ohio, dramatic increases in the funding. So what can we do? What we can do is make sure our legislators understand how state funding and the state funding proposal that's currently out there impacts our students. And that's why I'm sharing the information tonight. We are very proactive as a school district. We're members of multiple organizations. This past year, I've actually been asked to serve on the Executive Legislative Committee for the Alliance for High Quality Education. So I am in Columbus regularly working with other school leaders and legislators to advocate for public schools. The other piece is really working with our community, which is a step in what we're trying to do tonight, because we have our voice as a district, but the voice of our community and what they want from our schools, I'll tell you, means even more to legislators. They're voted for by our community members. So it's vital that our community reaches out to legislators in order to let them know how this is going to impact Medina City schools and what kind of funding and education we expect here in Medina to support our schools. I'm talking to you tonight because there's still time. The timeline for a budget is the governor makes a proposal, then that proposal goes through the House and the Senate. Currently, the budget proposal is in the House. We anticipate that within the next week or two, the House will release that budget to the Senate, and then the Senate will take time to review the budget. As the budget goes through both the House and the Senate, multiple changes are going to be made to that proposal. The deadline, however, for that proposal to be voted on and passed is July 1st. So that's our timeline to reach out to our local legislators. So how can you help? Stay informed. Look for information. We provide information on our website, through our podcast, through our regular newsletters and emails that go out. Contact your legislators. Let them know how it impacts Medina City schools, because quite frankly, they're serving large areas and they may not really be knowledgeable on how these funding changes will impact schools. And then spread awareness. We need people to talk about this. I've included up here this evening is our area legislator contact information. Sharon Ray in District 66. I can tell you that we have had communications with Sharon. We actually had, I think, brunch with her this past summer to talk to her about Medina City schools, and we've had board members reach out. Mark Romacek for District 22 in the Senate. Governor Mike DeWine, of course, this is his original proposal. And then Max Miller, our U.S. Congress representative. And again, the key here is sharing our story so that our legislators can make informed decisions when they're working within their committees down in Columbus and then eventually taking votes. So that ends my presentation this evening. We are going to make this presentation available on our website. We also intend to send this out to all staff because it's important that our staff members are informed. In addition, I would like to thank the board. If you haven't noticed, and I'm talking to the community, on the board agenda tonight is a resolution for our board members to take a vote on advocating for fair school funding and to support our schools. And the hope is that's a resolution we'll be able to pass tonight and then sending that resolution on to our legislators down in Columbus as well as here locally so that we can garner their support in supporting Medina City schools. At this time, are there any questions from the board regarding the proposed budget?
Excuse me. It was stark seeing the slide with the increase in the number of vouchers being used. The one that, just the huge increase. Any idea of what that is in dollars?
Not in a local level. At a state level, though, we did share that in the beginning of the slideshow. Here it is. These are the dollars statewide. I don't have the breakdown for you this evening on how that impacts specifically Medina City schools, but we will pull those numbers and make those available to the board and on our website.
I think for the public of our school system would be very interested to know what that is in millions of dollars. I'm sure it's in millions.
Yep.
So thank you.
Well, especially because right here, the increase of 88.6 million is for only 11% of Ohio students. So proportionately already.
Right. So if you look at the per pupil expenditure, it's completely slanted in terms of what public school students are receiving versus voucher when you look here at Medina.
And I think you need to repeat that we have not lost students. That's something that clicked with me. We have not lost students. These are students who are already going to these private schools, and they are receiving public school money, essentially.
That's correct.
I think it's also important to note that we are held to certain checks and balances and mandates and requirements that those other schools are not as well.
You're absolutely right, and that's actually something that we've advocated for in working in Columbus. Was for a similar system. If we are providing public dollars to private schools through vouchers, that they be held to the same standard academically. And there was a lot of pushback and lobbying against that, and that legislation did not go through. And a big reason for that is overall, the schools that are accepting vouchers are performing at lower levels than public schools are in Ohio.
I just want to say one thing on actually contacting the representatives at the end of the slide or slideshow. I know that this and various other things are topics that people get very passionate about, can get very heated about, things like that. But if you are going to call any of your representatives, whether you call during hours or you call after hours, they're much more likely to even give you a few seconds of listening if you're kind and direct about it. Mm-hmm. Don't call up and start yelling and screaming. that you're angry about something, because I know I would not feel very good about that. That would not be something that would help me be very receptive to what people are saying. That's definitely going to go for your Congress people and all your elected officials also. So, and a lot of times there's staffers on the other end. You're not talking to Max Miller. You're talking to one of his staffers. So.
And I agree 100% with what you're saying. And the reason why is because everybody wants what's best for kids in Ohio. And one thing that we have to keep in mind is we're working with legislators is they've got really big jobs, and schools and school funding is one little piece of it. And a lot of times they just don't know. And what we need to do is make sure they know.
I think, I don't know whether I sent you this article, but I think there was an article I read today where after kids go into schools with vouchers over a 3-year period, their test scores actually go down in every level. I mean, they drastically drop in English and science, math. So it's not like they're not necessarily getting a better education. And also, supposedly, Max Miller is supposed to show up at the library on Saturday at 3:45. So you can always come up there and talk to him then. But I have a feeling he's not going to be there. But it'd be nice to see.
Last question. One of the slides had what? Okay. Well, you can go last, Becky. You had 1.2 billion that was the state spent last year.
Correct, on vouchers.
And where did that figure come from?
Yeah, that's right from the state. Those are actual figures.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Sable, you mentioned that this presentation will be available on the website. What about you giving the presentation? Because I think it's valuable for people to hear actually what you're saying. Is it possible to snippet this out of the board meeting and post it?
Yeah, that's actually, Amy and I have already had that conversation. Yeah, the communication that's going out to staff, I think tomorrow, we won't be able to have it cut to just the presentation, but we're going to give a link to the board meeting later. When we do have it isolated to the presentation, we'll make sure that's available. In addition to that, we are preparing to do a podcast on this information as well. We're actually waiting to do that podcast until after spring break, the first or second week in April, because we're hoping we'll have updated information on the state budget and the school funding formula, because it should be moved on from the House, and I'll have been back in Columbus by then and should have some additional information. Great, thank you.
As soon as you still have some items.
It's time for the committee reports. Let's invite Ryan. Come on down and talk to us about facilities. And you've got an item or two on the agenda tonight, too.
Yeah, there are a couple items on the agenda tonight. One for our gas contract that we do through Ohio School Council. The other is for paving at Northrop. I had to make sure I remember those. So the one thing I did want to share from my facility committee meeting, I had Bob Positeri there, and he's head of the transportation, the maintenance of the buses. And Bob and I came up with a plan to renew the buses and keep the fleet at a serviceable age and a cost-effective way to do that. So that was a big presentation that we put together for the facility meeting. I have one coming up next facility meeting. We'll be doing some food service talks, so be happy to share those. But we put the buses on every year we're going to be purchasing 5 buses that extends the life. 12 years is the rotation before we've replaced the entire fleet. So every year, 5 buses, 12 years, we'll have replaced every bus. So that's the plan moving forward, and look forward to the next facility meeting. It's right around the corner. All right, thanks.
Great. Thank you. And Dr. Kwolek for policy.
So tonight we have some policies on for first. Do we have first readings on? Sorry, it's been quite the day. So maybe we
no
don't
first
have any.
readings tonight.
And no second readings? Yeah, we have a second reading. Okay, thanks, sorry.
Yeah,
Just
religious
needed a
release
minute.
time.
Yep, so I presented last board meeting on this policy, so everyone's intimately familiar with it. So this will be the final vote for that policy, and then it will become official policy. Policy committee met, we went over our next stack of policies for first reading. So what happens in our committee is we review those. Committee gets a month to look them over, then we'll review those again, and then we'll go send them to the board for first reading. So we will be meeting a lot. There's a lot of policies, once legislation is voted in and there's legal changes, that then turns into policy revisions or new policies. So we'll keep at it. We won't cancel.
Yep, and the last one is finance, which Dave is on his way up, so I'm done.
Okay, the Finance Committee met back in February. We had to say goodbye to 2 former Finance Committee members, Jay Austin and John Foster. We're looking for other Finance Committee members to take their place, so if you know someone out there who would like to join our committee, we meet roughly 6 times a year. It's always at 4:30 in the afternoon because Ms. Pritchard says she would like to be there at 4:30 in the afternoon. And again, if you want to be on our committee, it's great. We discuss the finances of the district. Last committee, we talked about the tax budget process, where we create the tax budget that is submitted to the county auditors, and we go step by step through the process and until the county auditors approve the tax budget. Well, this year they put a little wrench in it. They had a tax budget hearing, so we talked about the tax budget hearing to the Finance Committee and talked about what other tax budget hearings have done out in Lake County and Geauga County, and what we were anticipating and what we got from the Medina County Tax Budget Committee. We also talked about collections and where we stand. We talked about the January collections at that time, and then we talked about what Aaron basically presented today, the governor's biennium budget. So that was the Finance Committee. May I go on? Mr. President. Sure. Thank you. The February financials. We always start with our beginning balance, and our beginning balance hasn't changed because it's the beginning balance in July. 33 million. We've collected revenues of $81 million, and expenditures have hit $60 million. Our ending balance as of the February 28th was $51.7 million. With our revenue, we had revenues totaling the 81 million, and this represents 86% of our anticipated revenues on our 5-year forecast. Of this, $59 million is real property taxes. This is showing a 19.5% increase over last year, and that is directly due to the levy passed in November. We received, I believe it was $30 million here in February. The state foundation is at $12.3 million. This is 2.7% over last year at this time. It includes $400,000 in casino revenue. The casino revenue is that's all we're receiving for the year. And again, this was the largest revenue that we've received from the state for casino purposes. Go on to our expenditures. We have total expenditures of $60 million. That's 65% of our anticipated expenditures for the year based on the 5-year forecast. Our personnel is at $37 million. This is 2 points. It's 7.5 over last year, 7.5%. But last year, we had 27 pays, so if you recall, in past years, I've told you, most of our expenditures are on personnel and benefits, because that's what we do. We have personnel that deal with educating students. So most of our expenditures are in personnel. And if you look at that, being that we had 27 pays, it means we had smaller pays last year for personnel until the end of the year. And but if you compare this to 2 years ago, we're only 2.6% above what we spent 2 years ago. And the reason I want to compare it 2 years ago is 2 years ago was the last time we had 26 pays for our personnel. And if you think about it, we've moved up 2 years from that point, and only 2.6% above that time. And that deals with the cuts that we made here, going through precaution and going through the additional reductions because of the March levy failure. So now going on to benefits, this is more reflective of what we did with those cuts. We're at $13.7 million. This is down 2.7% year over year. And again, it's directly because of cuts or reduction in personnel last year, beginning of this year, because our benefit costs for medical went up 12% on the premiums. And then our other expenditures are down. We're at $9.3 million. They're down to 4.5% from the previous year. Our investments. This is where we actually have some good news for our community. We have been investing since I got here. I was happy that the board allowed me to bring in an investment advisor and create a portfolio back in the summer of 2014. Our investment portfolio is limited to the investments we can make. We can't go out into the stock market and throw out high-risk investments. We're limited to treasuries, CDs, commercial paper. So we are very limited on what we can invest in. But our investment portfolio currently has brought in $1.3 million to offset taxpayers. And this is $354,000 above last year, or sorry, above February at this time. And finally, I'd like to talk about our true days cash. If you recall when I spoke last board meeting in January, I was saying this is where we are at our very lowest end in January. And you could see the last 3 years, January has always been lowest. In February, we always click up, and that's because we received the first half property tax advances. Most of the monies come in February. This year, our January low point wasn't as low because the auditor shocked me by giving us an advance on the new levy of which they were just collecting on. So the low point wasn't as low as it could have been. So I was happy with that. Now you see the monies coming in from the new levy in February. That's why this year's monies in the yellow are greater than last year's monies in the green. So, questions on the finances? Okay, for the last page, this is for the community. Please visit our website for any information, and our financial documents are all out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. We are at the, at the board communication point, and we'll start with Ms. Pritchard over here.
The student of the month at the Career Center is another Medina person, Caitlin Malbin. She's in allied health and pre-nursing and president of her class. The Medina March students of the month are Cameron Anderson and Max Dudley. Congratulations to the MTSS coach Maria Colze, who received one of 2 nationwide hero awards for the MTSS Heroes Award program. I attended the Northrop Talent Show, which included 159 students plus staff and the 2 secretaries who really rocked it to their dance. It was in the middle auditorium, which was packed. There was not room for one more person to get in there. It was a shout out to all the staff. They did an amazing job, and the performers were very, very good, and they did not have a care in the world as they went out there and sang and danced and did a lot of different things. The art show is still going on and businesses on the square. The preschool was invited, and some of them are in Huntington Bank, and they are very good, and I just want to give them a shout out for all their hard work. I read to the kindergarten class at Blake, and I don't know what makes me always ask a question, because I don't want to know the answer sometimes. But I was going to go yesterday to see the leprechaun that this one girl claims that she caught, and she has a picture of it, but I didn't get a chance. So next year I'll go. She'll be in 1st grade. And I got to watch Mr. Douglas's class do part of the Macbeth program. Anna Shork, who was today named, I think it was today, the gymnast of Medina County, also finished 5th in the balance beam and was all-state. Dominic DiFilippo and Chad Nicholson qualified for the state wrestling tournament. I just want you to know that rugby and guys volleyball are now playing. Just check the athletic website for games. The musical starts on April 11th, goes April 11th, 12th, and 13th. For those of you who haven't heard or didn't read it in the paper, the Career Center is expanding. We now have leased the Akron U facility off of Wedgwood Road for the adult education department. I attended the Saturday breakfast that the Diesel kids put on, and it was very nice. Did a good job. The Hall of Fame for Medina City Schools was on Friday. We honored 9 outstanding alumni, and I want to thank Mrs. Busby, Mrs. Debnars, and Jared Fry for their hard work. It was a very nice evening. Everybody who was honored was there except for Rear Admiral Greg Newkirk, who was on a boat in Japan, but he sent in a very nice, salute to his parents and many of the people that were there. Mrs. Smoyer and I attended an OSBA master class, which was something new that they put on. And there were some things that we wanted to share. That we basically picked up from them. They said that they said that we should have 3 things that we want to share with the community each month. We should have policy review every 5 years. I think we've done that before, much sooner. And we should invite legislators to schools. So here's one thing I want to share with you, and Mr. Sable's already done it, but if you want the email for Sharon Ray, it's rep66@ohiohouse.gov, and if you want for the Ohio Senate, it's sd22@ohiosenate.gov. And beside the passing of the teacher here recently, Nancy Britton, who taught at Claggett and served on the EMT for 15 years. She was a 25-year veteran teacher, passed away recently. A very beloved teacher who taught health and just did a great job. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Pritchard. Mr. Nichols.
Yeah, so I had a couple things come up since the last board meeting. I wasn't able to make it to the finance meeting, but Dave gave us a good rundown of that, like he always does. I was able to actually make it over to Fenn to look at the aliens that were presented and many, many more across the multiple classrooms. It was kind of cool to hear the differences between not only each group, but each classroom, and just the reasoning, kind of what we heard here, the reasoning why aliens had certain adaptations to survive on their specific planets. So that was cool to get kind of the full experience with all the kids there. In addition to that, I ended up making it to the OSBA Spring Conference, and Ms. Parkhurst over there ended up getting a little award for all of her time on school board. What, 30, 40, 50 years?
Which is funny because I'm only 29. So.
It's true. I don't know how you did it. No, I believe it was 10 years. But that was really nice. I was glad to be there to support Mrs. Parkhurst. And in typical me fashion, I threw off some of the kids that are part of the culinary program there. Me and Ryan were up there trying to figure out what was in one of the desserts. And it was the dessert of a kid that wasn't standing there. They came over and they started explaining it, gave us a whole rundown. And I just nodded my head a little bit and said, "Thank you, chef." And they were like, "Wait, what?" And then Ryan's like, "Have you seen The Bear?" And they lost their mind. They were like, "Oh my gosh, I've really wanted to see that so bad. I've wanted to see it." And then the teacher that was actually in charge of it just like gave us a stare and was like, "Yeah, I can't watch it. It's too real for me. It brings back flashbacks. I can't do that." So for the realness of the TV show The Bear, apparently pretty real. And then I went over to another student and I asked 3 of them, I said, "All right, give me, whose dessert am I picking up here?" And one kid instantly was like, "Oh, you got to get mine," instantly. Everybody else didn't even get a chance. And I did a similar thing and nodded my head and said, "Heard, chef, thank you, chef," and picked it up and walked away. And he was also equally dumbfounded that I had addressed him like that. But it was funny to throw off the culinary students a little bit, but it was all good. It was all good.
Mrs. Parkhurst, but you can come in again at the end if you have to.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Nichols, for mentioning Wednesday evening. I want to thank Mr. Nichols, Mrs. Smoyer, Mr. Sable, Mr. Chambers, Mr. O'Call, and Mrs. Busby for attending that. That was a very special evening, and 10 years has flown by really quickly, and that's probably because we're such a great district with a great community and great teachers, staff, students, just great people to work for, and it has been my honor and privilege to serve. The only thing I would like to mention, that hasn't been mentioned already, is a reminder that our Portrait to Practice is April 10th from 5:30 to 7 o'clock at Claggett, and we invite the whole entire community to come one, come all. There will be great things there. There might be food there as well from our cooking students, maybe? Okay. Now it's out there, so got to make it happen. But no, great things. So I invite the entire community to come and see what our wonderful students and teachers are doing. So thank you very much.
Mrs. Smoyer.
Thank you. Yes, it was a wonderful dinner, and it was great to see Rebecca get that award. I was amazed at how much time several of these board members had been in there, including the one that was the longest running was 40 years. So somebody who had been, on the board for 40 years had been voted upon many times, so they must be doing a very good job. All right, otherwise, the Medina Career Center's awards, I wanted to just do a shout out to Mackenzie Lapps, Lauren Cadlick, Zayamara Glover, Jackson Gummo, and Isaac Lewis. They all competed at the states, and they are going to nationals in Florida, so in the near future, actually in June. So they did a great job, and they are going to go to Orlando. And then the gymnastics, you mentioned about some of the gymnastics. I just saw that Anna Shork and Haley Hoffman were the Gazette's all-county gymnast, and Haley's little sister Bethany, who is a freshman, received an honorable mention. So from Medina, so that was great. I got to read to the 3rd grade class at Blake Elementary. That was a lot of fun. Lots of questions. Reminded me of my PTO days of going in and reading. Again, lots of questions, and I felt horrible for the teacher was not there that day, so we had a sub, and we went in, and he was a little dumbfounded that I was there, but he's like, yes, he needed a break. So it was wonderful. So I took that on. Let's see. Otherwise, I attended the band, the Medina High School Band's winter concert, and they're so impressive how awesome they are compared to when I personally was in band. The Medina High School Band just blows them away, which they actually did very well. We actually hosted the OMAA's contest this past weekend, and our bands received all A's. So that was great. So kudos to them. And I just wanted to shout out to Mr. Locker and Ms. Snide. They've been tasked with covering more this year due to cuts. And also one of the band directors did have a baby. So they are covering for her as well, which is great. And speaking of the bands, they are going to be having a Jazzmatazz on April 5th. So it opens at 5 p.m. at the high school in the PAC and in the cafeterias, and the tickets can be purchased in advance. There's a link that I can't tell you what it is right now, but until April 1st, adults and students are $15 in advance and $18 at the door, and seniors and children 10 and under get a discount at $12 in advance and $15 at the door. So this includes general admission to all musical performances, which they have several jazz bands all around the school, a raffle ticket, which there are many, many raffles going on, and a $250 cash prize. That's mine. Yeah. Oh, and you get a dessert box. So if you do that. Otherwise, I have a lot today. I'm pretty impressed. I'm going to pat myself. All right. The other one, we've brought this lady up many times, Ella Nicholson. She was in Cuba this past weekend, and she took first place in the Pan Am Junior weightlifting. Again, I used to babysit this girl. She is to be reckoned with, and she's going to be going to the Olympics. I can just see it now. Let's see. And then at the OSBA training that Ms. Pritchard mentioned about it, the Beyond the Basics Mastering the Role of the Leader, I felt I should take that, especially with being the VP this time. 3 things that I got. There's a need to contact our legislators. She mentioned that because every school district is different and they need to understand ours. So I know I personally will be reaching out. I hope you will too. Build relationships as a board with our community, such as going to senior centers. So we had talked about that actually earlier today. This one stood out to me. Have food and a photo op, and the local legislators will come. All right, they will. But on another thing is be a united front. So as a board, we all 5 are a united front for our school. Let's see. And otherwise, wish me luck. I'll be chaperoning the band for the Disney trip starting on Thursday. So for a whole week, 22 hours in a bus. I gotcha.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I won't keep everybody too long. I did also attend the Sydney Fenn their alien presentation. They were learning about our planets, and the students had to come up with an alien, and I got to go with Mr. Nichols, and we got to go to the classrooms and talk to them, and they were very passionate. I was quite intrigued by some of the aliens that were created and some of the materials they used and why they chose them. Sometimes it was, well, that's all I have, but they were very creative, and it was very interesting, especially to me, since I studied that a long time ago. I also got to go to Heritage for a presentation of a Distinguished Service Award to their custodian, whose name is escaping me, and I apologize, but that was, it's so nice to surprise somebody with that. And Kim Beard. It was nice to surprise Kim, and I know the staff was running around trying to keep her away from us so that she didn't know we were there. But I suspect she probably knew something was up. And then finally, it's so critical that our district, help us advocate for our students and our district at the state and federal level. We are doing our absolute best, but we need everybody to help us advocate for our kids in our district. And that is all I have. Next up is public comment time. It looks like I have one public comment. Allow me to read this, and then we'll get started. Community members wishing to address the board are asked to abide by the following guidelines. Attendees shall register their intention to comment in the public portion of the meeting upon their arrival at the meeting. After those that have registered have spoken, if time allows, the board president will ask for public comment from all other attendees. Please state your name, address, and affiliation. Please keep your comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. No participant may speak more than once on the same topic unless all others who wish to speak on that topic have been heard. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question board members individually. And our speaker is Victoria Drewley, who I do know.
Thank you. My name is Victoria Drewley. I live at 896 Laurel Glens Drive here in Medina. I think that's it, right? You don't need my phone number. Nobody needs to call me. I want to thank Superintendent Sable for sharing the information about the Fair School Funding Plan and for helping us understand the financial challenges that our district is facing. I also want to thank the board for considering a resolution in support of current accurate inputs in the funding formula and for fully implementing the Fair School Funding Plan. By passing a resolution, the board will send a strong statement that Medina will fight for what our students deserve. We cannot afford to let bad data determine the future of our schools. This resolution is more than a formality. It's a call to action that extends to all of us. Every member of this community needs to reach out to our state representatives and demand that they fully fund and fully enact the Fair School Funding Plan using real up-to-date numbers. And this is a fight that we cannot afford to sit out. So what does that look like? That can be really intimidating to hear that we're all being called to do this. And that's where I'll do a plug for Kids First Medina. If you're not sure how to reach out to your representatives, if you're not sure what to say or what to do, then you can reach us on Facebook, Kids First Medina. You can send us an email, kidsfirstmedina@gmail.com. And we have statements for you to make. We have materials to share. We have data. Aaron mentioned tonight that 90% of the students in Ohio, 89%, but 90% of students in Ohio go to public schools. 95% of students with disabilities go to public schools. We also just recently found out that 90% of people using voucher monies come from wealthy households. So that's people that are making well above the median income level. We found out that 20%, almost 20%, 18% of people using voucher money are they're in the 1% top earners in our state. So why are we trying to cut $100 million from public schools and give $1 billion to vouchers to people who don't need it? But there's a lot of good information like that, and I'll also do a plug for All In for Ohio Kids. It's a coalition trying to get parents together to teach them how to write testimony. and to reach out to our representatives to stay more informed with what's going on. We, like Aaron said, we do have time, but we don't have a ton of time. We really need to act now on this. And if you're looking for more information about what's going on, Policy Matters Ohio has a lot of the data and how it affects other districts in the state, because this is a fight that it's not just Medina, it's everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Drewley. And we are now on to Treasurer Action Items G.
Yes, if it pleases the board. Item number 1, it's recommended the Board of Education approve the February 2025 Treasurer's Financial Report. Item number 2, supplemental to permanent appropriations. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve the following supplemental to the 24-25 permanent appropriations. On these items that you see here, your EBT Administrative Fund is funding that was given to the Food Service Department, and we're using the last of the funds this year. You have various items for your buildings here, your capstone at the high school, your field trip at Blake. You have auxiliary service monies. These are the last of the monies that the state gives to the school district to disperse to our auxiliary services. These are also a true-up for the year. So you could see that both St. Francis and MCA are moving up, and the nursery is, their budget is being cut here. And it's all based on student numbers. You have the OAG Safety Grant. This is a grant that Mr. O'Call applied for and received from our Ohio Attorney Generals. And then finally, our Title III LEP. This is the full funding for the LEP. If it's below $10,000, it doesn't come from the state to us. It comes from the ESC to us. Item number 3 is accepting the amounts and rates. It is recommended that the Board of Education adopt the resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor for tax year 25, collection year 26. This is an acceptance that is on a yearly basis, and the rates did not change from this year.
I would entertain a motion for Treasurer Action Items G1 through 3.
I'll make a motion to approve the treasurer's action items 1 through 3.
Thank you, Mrs. Pritchard.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Any questions, comments from anyone?
It seems that one thing the state is doing is making more of these grants available. Instead of funding districts, they're making them into grants that you have to apply for. So thank you, Mr. O'Call, for researching that and applying for those funds for our district.
Anybody else? Hearing none. Mr. Chambers, when you're ready.
Yes, Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Ms. Moyer?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Sable, Superintendent Action Items H.
Number 1, it is recommended that the Board of Education accept the following donations to Medina City Schools. I do want to point out the rather large donation to the Medina High School vocal program from Harmony Helpers. Harmony Helpers is our parent group that supports our vocal musical program. So we're very blessed in this district with the support and the high quality arts programs, as Amy had already mentioned this evening. Number 2 is policy. As Dr. Kwolek brought up, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the second reading and adoption of the following new policy. That is for the religious release time as mandated by new legislation. Number 3, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following service agreements. The first 2 agreements from Pupil Services is for extended year summer school services for students that qualify per their IEP. Both of these programs are programs that we have contracted with in the past. The second is from the Treasurer's Office for Frontline Education and Power School Group. The one is an extension from Frontline of current programming that we already have in place. These programs will allow us to look at additional data from across the state, as well as develop comparisons in charts, which will be useful for us on many fronts. The second program is to assist department heads, central office administrative team members in best utilizing their budgets. Number 4 is a proposal for Northrop paving. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the proposal from Vasco Asphalt Company for paving at Eliza Northrop Elementary School in the amount of approximately $92,000. And that's part of our summer work, as mentioned by Mr. O'Cole. Number 5, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the resolution authorizing the execution and delivery of a master electric energy sales agreement between Medina City School District and Power 4 Schools, endorsed electric supplier. And this is effective July 1st, 25 through June 30th. This is a consortium we've been a part of for many years and saves us significant money in grouping with other entities in order to lower those costs. Number 6, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following overnight field trips in compliance with Policy 2340. 2 of these are district wrestling tournament as well as OHSAA wrestling tournament for state competition. The second 2 are the Washington, D.C. trips for next school year. It's nice to see these up on the agenda early. But they are both going to be going in the fall. And then number 7 is personnel. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following personnel recommendations per completion of all required paperwork to Mr. Shields, Director of Human Resources. And there's a few I wanted to highlight here, but for whatever reason, my board docs is going at a snail's pace tonight. It sounds like I'm not alone. It just loaded and unloaded. Couple things I did want to point out off the top of my head, though, is we do have a teacher that's resigning, and it is not a mistake. That Garfield Elementary, thank you, I have it up now. Garfield Elementary listed. This teacher has been on an approved leave, and that's the last building where they worked. In addition, we have multiple co-curricular contracts on the agenda for the spring. We also have non-renewals for co-curricular contracts for 24-25. Which is happens regularly. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the superintendent's action items 1 through 7.
Thank you, Ms. Pritchard.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Parkhurst. Any questions, comments from anybody?
I just want to say the 2 certified resignations, Nikki Ferrugio and Christy Corcoran, probably 2 of my last students. Nikki was in my gym class and got hurt. We were playing the World Championship kickball game. And it was America versus Venezuela. We didn't think we could take on Russia yet. But she had to get to first base, and she did, but she twisted her ankle, and so I got down off the bleachers. And for those who don't know, she was Nikki Taft, and I said, well, give me your mom's phone number, and I'll call her. And she goes, oh, well, she works in Mr. Irish's office. I go, who is that? And she goes, oh, Pat Taft, the secretary. I go, well, I'm out of a job now. But so anyways, and Christy I had on student council and in gym class, and just 2 really wonderful people and 2 individuals that we're going to miss. And then I just want to say, Liz Kiosis, the cafeteria manager at Medina High School, please say it isn't so. She is such a wonderful
Yeah,
person.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, unfortunately, it is.
I know. I mean, she has done so much with that cafeteria. She's really going to be missed. So I'm sorry to see her go. But anyways, that's all I have.
Anything else from anybody?
I was going to mention Liz as well. She's a wonderful person to work with, has helped me immensely with several different things that I've been a part of, but I know she's going to leave it in good hands. She has been training those ladies that work with her immensely, and I know they're going to leave it in good hands. But we're going to miss Liz.
And I hope they all come in May for our retirement recognition meeting.
Anything else? All right, hearing none, Mr. Chambers, when you're ready.
Ms. Pritchard.
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Aye.
Mr. Nichols.
Aye.
Ms. Smoyer.
Aye.
Mr. West.
Yes.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is an action item for the board, a resolution in support of the Fair School Funding Plan. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the resolution in support of the Fair School Funding Plan to emphasize the need for continued investment in Ohio students and public schools. Whereas the Ohio Constitution guarantees thorough and efficient system of common schools throughout the state, Article 6, Section 2, and the Ohio Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that the state school funding system must both be adequate and equitable, and whereas the Fair School Funding Plan was developed using research-driven inputs to ensure that all Ohio students receive the resources necessary for a high-quality education, regardless of their zip code, and whereas the Fair School Funding Plan represents a bipartisan approach to address the long-standing inequities in Ohio's school funding system by accurately determining the cost of educating a student, utilizing a base cost method that reflects actual district needs, and whereas the current state biennial budget continues funding the Fair School Funding Plan, but fails to update the base cost calculations, relying on outdated 2022 inputs that do not account for current inflationary measures, rising personnel costs, or evolving student needs, and whereas Ohio's commitment to an equitable funding formula must include periodic updates to cost inputs to ensure districts receive an accurate and fair allocation of state resources, and whereas any proposal to reduce funding for districts currently receiving funding guarantees would destabilize educational services, harm students, and undermine the intent of the Fair School Funding Plan by shifting financial burdens onto local taxpayers or forcing cuts to essential programs, and whereas a fully implemented and regularly updated Fair School Funding Plan benefits all Ohio students by ensuring predictability, adequacy, and fairness in school funding allocations. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Medina City School Board of Education, 1, expresses strong support for the continued implementation and full funding of the Fair School Funding Plan, including the use of updated research-based cost inputs that reflect current economic conditions and student needs. 2, rejects any proposals to cut funding from school districts currently receiving funding guarantees, as such actions would create financial instability and negatively impact students and communities. 3, calls upon the Ohio General Assembly and the governor to uphold their commitment to fair and adequate school funding by ensuring that the future biennial budgets fully fund the Fair School Funding Plan and update cost calculations to reflect the actual cost of educating Ohio students. 4, urges the Ohio General Assembly and the governor to advocate for equitable school funding system that supports all Ohio students and does not pit districts against one another in a zero-sum funding model. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to members of the Ohio General Assembly, the Governor of Ohio, the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce, and other relevant stakeholders to emphasize the need for continued investment in Ohio students and public schools. I would entertain a motion on this resolution.
I would like to make a motion to take care of this resolution.
Thank you, Mrs. Smoyer. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Parkhurst. Any questions or comments from anybody? Anyone?
I do think it's important for us to be doing this, and I do fully support this. And I think it's important that we're bringing this to the attention of our community members and to our legislators, how it will directly impact us and tell our story.
I agree, and I think it's important that we as the board do this. We're advocating for our students in our district, and we need everybody's help along with this, but this is our part, a big part of it. Anybody else? Hearing none. Mr. Chambers, when you're ready.
Ms. Smoyer?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. West?
A resounding yes.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to briefly add, if it's possible, and Craig might need your help with this, to print this out so board members can sign this now that it's passed tonight, because Lisa and I have already talked. We want to get this out tomorrow to the legislators.
Next up is an executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, or compensation of a public employee or official, to consider the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual, discussion with the board's legal counsel of disputes involving the board that are the subject of pending or imminent court action, preparation for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. I would entertain a motion to move to executive session.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Pritchard. Mr. Nichols, there will be no action taken following the executive session. Mr. Chambers, when you're ready.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Ms. Smoyer?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's it for our regular meeting. Thank you, everybody.